Hey, real quick, Jeff Tedford stepped down at Fresno State after we recorded this episode. So ignore everything we say about the Bulldogs. We will react to it on a coming episode. But yeah, we did not have that information when we recorded it, and Fresno State will not have Jeff Tedford this year. Changes things.
Dan Rubenstein, we are back.
It feels great to be back.
We got one in the books. We got another one coming up today. We have many more to follow, like 15 more to follow, 16 more to follow.
Yeah.
I have not done the math on it. It is officially preview season. How does it feel? How does it feel to you?
Scary, exciting. I'm deep diving a lot of information, not unlike both of our honeymoons, like preparation thereof. Like, it is just a great time of year, Ty. It's wonderful. Sun is out. Everybody, hope springs eternal for everybody in college football, except New Mexico? I don't know. I was just trying to come up with one of the teams. This is great. I love it. Hey, sorry for the quick interruption, but it'd be incredible if you considered subscribing to the Solid Verbal YouTube channel right down below.
I'm excited. I'm excited to have everybody back with us here in the Verballerhood. Thank you one and all for coming on back. Hit follow, hit subscribe so that you don't miss any of our episodes. Of course, wherever you can provide a rating or a review or can share with a friend. We appreciate that stuff. Not required to be in our community. Goes a long way, though. Helps Dan and I out. Helps grow the community in a really meaningful way. So if you're able, please do consider doing that. Of course, Verballers.com is where you can get the ad-free episodes, the bonus content that we do, and all of the other eventual perks that we will roll out as we get a little bit closer to the college football season. But as I said, today is part 2 of our Group of 5 preview. On the previous episode, we went deep on the American as well as Conference USA, sort of a USA-themed thing.
That's true.
Well, we didn't group them together with that in mind. It just sort of worked out that way.
Happened nicely, yeah.
Today, though, we're going to do the Mountain West, the Sun Belt, and the MAC. We got 3 conferences. Go back and listen to part 1 if you want to hear our playoff, our championship tiers that we put out there, TIERS, Dan, with respect to which of these teams we think are going to get into the college football playoff. But today we're going to be focused specifically on those 3 conferences. Much like the last episode, didn't have a whole lot to add into the volcano last episode, but Takatoa is again behind me. So if we've got anything that we want to put out there, any hot takes, just let us know. Dan, I say us, me and Takatoa, let us know if you've got anything that you need to get off your chest. I will do the same. Verballerhood, solidverbal@gmail.com. Let us know if you've got something to add to the conversation. Without further ado, let's get into the Mountain West.
Let's.
Call Kenny Loggins because you're in the danger zone.
The Mountain West.
So again, it's all about feeling dangerous, Dan.
Yeah.
Feeling dangerous. Who feels the most dangerous to you of the teams in the Mountain West? If you had to break these down from like your championship tier, most dangerous teams that are maybe a rung below, and then the teams where it's just not happening. How do you break these teams down?
I think I have Boise State and Fresno as the true danger contenders to America in this moment. Okay. And I think that's where the gap is, just because of, UNLV is in the championship game last year, but losing Jade Mayava, but having a lot of continuity otherwise. Wyoming changing coaches, Air Force losing a ton, Colorado State still rebuilding, Utah State loses their coach like a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
Hawaii seems upward trajectory. San Diego State starting over at head coach. San Jose State starting over at head coach. That there is, even if Boise State is starting over with a full-time new head coach, that full-time interim coach, that's not actual grammar, but that interim coach won the Mountain West, finished strong, has recruited pretty well, has hit the portal and retained really well. And I think there are fewer questions about Boise in this moment, especially with their conference slate ahead of them, that they're powerful. I think Jeff Tedford's probably the best coach in the conference, ceiling-wise and history-wise. I mean, you can make the argument for Calhoun as well at Air Force, but I think with Mikey Keene back, with the pop that they should once again and the improvement that they should have on defense, I think those two stand alone to me. And I don't believe they play during the regular season.
They don't. They don't, which is interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got Boise and Fresno as well. We talked it through in our first episode. Go back last week and listen. We've got them both in our small list of teams, frankly, that we think could make that playoff spot from the G5 level. Other than Boise and Fresno, which are, I think, undisputedly on that top rung, I've got UNLV, Wyoming, Air Force, and Colorado State. One rung down. I've labeled this tier no idea. I have no idea. I don't know what to expect from any of those four teams. Beneath them, in a tier that I've just labeled the spicy chicken sandwich, don't know why, Hawaii. I've got some interesting things to talk about with Hawaii. And then beyond that, you've got new coaches at San Diego State and San Jose State, which both of whom I like, but I don't know if I expect much out of either of those schools. And then my tier that I've just labeled, Utah State, excuse me.
Yeah.
Nevada, rebuilding. New Mexico, rebuilding. There's a grouping of teams at the bottom that have a lot of new coach situations that we can get into here. In a
Worst places, though, to start than Bronco Mendenhall with New Mexico.
Absolutely.
Took a couple of years off, hung out, back in the game. Yeah.
I'm with you. Let's start with Boise.
Let's start with Boise State. This is going to be a team led by its offensive line and All-American caliber running back, Ashton Ginty. That's just the reality of the situation. We'll see where things land at quarterback, whether it's the USC blue chip transfer, Malachi Nelson, or Maddox Madsen, who I think flashed some last year in a back and forth situation with Taylon Green. But I think they're going to have a good amount of interesting players on offense. They're going to score points. The defense kind of fell off a cliff, which was very weird given Andy Avalos was the former head coach and his background putting together good defenses at Boise and, Eugene, Oregon. He moves on. He's at, I think, TCU now. He's their new defensive coordinator. But I think if they can get the defense in order against this schedule, which I think they're going to be largely favored by other than the Oregon game, I think Boise's in a great place. Not getting Fresno, with the other dangerous teams having clear questions. I think I'd just rather be Boise right now. Coming off of the way that they finished with Spencer Danielson, it was a blowout win, I believe, over UNLV in the Mountain West Championship game last year. I think just they're operating on a slick track right now.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest questions are at quarterback and with the defense.
Yeah.
Those are my two big questions. I think they're dangerous if we're going to stick with that theme for all the reasons you described, not the least of which is Ashton Ginty, who might be one of the 5 best running backs in the country. He's very, very solid, and they will lean on him. But quarterback, what are we going to get? Defense, what are we going to get? The defense needs to improve. Now, I believe Boise has 11 returning starters on defense. That might not be the actual number, but it's even if it's close, it's still a lot back. So they need to improve on that given the amount that they've got returning. Otherwise, though, I think the schedule sets up well, as you alluded. They do miss Fresno. They also miss Air Force in conference play. There's a lot to like about this team. There's a lot to like. And I think specifically with the new coach, when he became the interim last year, kind of out of nowhere, started winning games, right?
Yeah.
Started winning games.
Yeah.
They went on a run down the stretch last season. And I think that bodes well for what it looks like now with him in charge full time. It doesn't mean they will have that level of success, but all indicators seem to point towards a really good season for Boise State. Per the Bill Connolly projections, he's got them inside his top 40 with an average win total around 9. So his computer is seeing the same thing that we're seeing when we're just sort of looking at it from afar, not deep in the numbers or anything. It seems like it's going to be another good season for Boise, barring any kind of collapse.
Yeah, they have Wazoo in Boise. They travel to the islands, which I think can be tricky, and that's a back-to-back with a bye week in between UNLV on the road. But otherwise, missing Fresno, I'm always worried when any team, let alone Boise, goes to Laramie. It'll be a new head coach for Wyoming, but that late in the season, that's tricky. It's going to be cold and at altitude, so I mean, who did Wyoming beat last year? Texas Tech early on, I want to say, to start the season. So it's trappy, the schedule, but it's not, bang, 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 bang with Murderers Row type opponents. So I think Boise's in a good place. I like their coordinators, by the way. It's Dirk Cutter, who came in, I believe, early on last season to take over the offense, and Eric Chenander, who has major program experience, did good things at both Oregon, UCF, and Nebraska, I believe. He was a Scott Frost guy, but I think he's pretty well regarded. So I think they're on solid ground.
It's Boise, it's Fresno.
Yeah.
What is the difference between those two teams? Like, I look at Fresno and I say they're dangerous because they have a lot back. They might not be dangerous because the defense still remains something of an open question. Not to be too simplistic about these things. Of course, there's nuance that we can try to touch up against here, but what is the biggest difference from your point of view if you're comparing these two teams?
Well, Fresno is at Michigan. They play Washington State, which Boise does as well, and they're at UCLA. I think the schedule is a little bit more difficult. I would say that there is a little bit of like the stability open question with Jeff Tedford's health. I know he insisted in the spring that he's like full go, feeling great, but like the leaving, coming back, taking time, like I think that can affect things behind the scenes when leadership is in and out. And I don't blame him. Obviously, you got to deal with health first and foremost, but you know, he's been around a while. So I also look at Jeff Tedford being at Fresno as an advantage that Fresno has over Boise, that he has weathered more games as a head coach, has a better feel for big games, for meaningful games, for recruiting, for, you know, in-season adjustments. And even with a slow start, they've managed in the last few years to turn things around, and, you know, has a good eye for quarterbacks and bringing in Jake Haener. That kind of thing is just, it's meaningful to me. And I think Mikey Keene right now, given his experience in that system, has a leg up on the quarterback situation at Boise in this moment. We'll see what happens after the first month or whatever. So that is the difference to me, is a little bit more stability when Jeff Tedford is there, when Mikey Keene is starting. But I think the difference with Boise is, honestly, it's star power on offense because of Ashton Jeanty.
Are you keen for Mikey Keene?
I think he's fine. I know he is, like, he's one of the more well-regarded, or the most well-regarded G5 quarterback, if we're going to lump them all together, just in terms of ceiling and production and experience. I didn't love him at UCF. I think he's improved some in a quarterback-friendly system at Fresno, but I don't know. I think his ceiling is relatively capped.
Fresno should be favored in like 10 of their 12 games this year, and the only two are probably the Michigan and the UCLA games that you alluded to earlier.
Yeah, and they've won at UCLA as a program recently. That was a Jake Haener team, but yeah.
They've won, and we talked about it last episode. They could win again. That game is later in the year. I could see Mikey Keene taking a step forward. You're right. It's a quarterback-friendly system. They've got 8 starters back on offense. I think that is key.
Yep.
They also went out and, you know, tried to do things as best they could to beef up what they've got on defense. Corey Foreman's a big name, comes over from USC.
Sure.
Seems like they're on a collision course with Boise, all things being equal. But for me, it's more of an open question about their defense, and if their defense can hold serve. They just need to be better on that side of the ball. And frankly, that's the case for Boise as well. There might be more star power for Boise, but they've got defensive questions that are similar. They might have a little bit more back, but by and large, it's can these teams play defense? Whoever plays better defense among them is probably the one that's going to come out of the conference. Yeah.
It's also the conference, the back half of the conference was pretty god-awful last year. So it's hard to take into account momentum or seeing what they did last year against quality opponents, especially in the back half, because they played so many garbage teams last year. But a lot of there were a lot of good things from this Fresno defense in terms of getting off of the field or preventing big plays. Like, even though you could move the ball against the Bulldogs, there was enough there to make me think that they're moving in the right direction.
Can we talk about Hawaii quick?
Please, Timmy Chang.
I think Hawaii's spicy this year.
Braden Shager,
yeah. Good quarterback. Needs to cut down on his interceptions.
Sure.
But this team's got a lot back. I believe they're also starting a 5'6" running back, Cam Barfield, who transferred in from Boston College.
Okay.
Which means there is a lot of mysterious squirt-through potential. No?
There is.
Hawaii could be the squirt-through king of the 2024 season.
My nickname in high school. Continue.
I think they're scoring 31 points a game. I think the defense improves. I think they're going to a bowl. And as you mentioned before, like sometimes going to the islands can be weird.
Of course.
It could be weird. It depends on situations and where you're catching teams with respect to their own schedules. But I just think Hawaii across the board in year 3 under Timmy Chang is going to be better, going to be more potent on offense. The defense has to improve. They will catch somebody. I don't know who it'll be, but there will be a game that kicks off at like 11:59 p.m. Eastern time that most of the college football loving world doesn't see. They wake up the next day and it's like, okay. Didn't see that one coming.
That's totally true. Totally true. Schedule's tricky, especially like there's a meaty middle to their schedule. At San Diego State, Boise State, at Wazoo, Nevada, whatever, at Fresno, UNLV, all like October, early November.
Yeah.
That's going to be very tough for the Warriors.
Do you feel similarly though? Like, are you?
Yeah.
What is your spice level for the Hawaii spicy chicken sandwich?
It's going to be more sweet than spicy, which means it's going to be more offense than defense. There's not going to be a ton of bite to the defense. They were catastrophically bad last year. So one of those teams that like will print sweatshirts that say we're below average, and they will, you're absolutely right. They'll play a late game in Hawaii and they'll get a weird body clock situation, or they will find a secondary that's ripe for the plucking, and Shager will put up 443 yards and 4 touchdowns and 2 picks, and it will be enough to win that game 47-43.
They're dangerous because of the offense, but in a recurring theme, not as dangerous because of the defense, right? It's going to be a theme here on this entire episode.
Yeah.
This entire episode as we talk about G5. It's not a unique thing to any of these teams.
No.
On that next rung down, if we go back up to the top, Boise, Fresno are obvious front runners. The next rung down for me was UNLV, Wyoming, Air Force, and Colorado State.
Oh, I think it's definitely UNLV above, but yes.
I have UNLV above as well.
Okay.
And I know we both like Barry Odom a lot. I am insanely curious to see what Matthew Sluka looks like, the Holy Cross transfer, the quarterback.
Yep.
When he entered the portal, he was a very popular curiosity in college football media. He figures to be the quarterback. Lost Jade Maava, went to USC. I think it'll be tough to get back to 9 wins for this team.
Okay.
I don't see it getting quite back to those heights. Just seems like a lot too tall of a task for Barry Odom now after a pretty successful campaign a year ago. What say you about UNLV? Do you feel similarly?
I think so. It's schedule could be catastrophic early. Yeah. As they work in a new quarterback. By the way, UNLV has the best receiver in the conference by kind of a wide margin in Ricky White.
Yes.
Which is a great starting point for a new quarterback. And I think they have Houston early, Kansas early, Syracuse early. Like, it's a tough. I remember looking at this schedule. I apologize for not having it in front of me, but you can pull it up. Like, there's a world in which they start 1-3 and end like 8-4. UNLV, as they get their bearings, especially on offense. I like Brendan Marion, the offensive coordinator, who's bounced around a bunch in the sport. And I just, even though the defense wasn't as good last year as the offense, like, I just trust Barry Odom to figure out that side of the ball. Now, he didn't always do it at Mizzou as a head coach, but I give him credit for how quickly he got UNLV competitive. And I'm bullish on the Rebels right now.
Yeah, I think the program's in a good spot, but I getting back to 9 wins. I mean, I don't know. I'm very curious though about Matthew Sluka. That one to me is going to be interesting. I'm sort of a sucker for all of these FCS quarterbacks that come up to the FBS level and are met with some acclaim.
I mean, how many have there been?
Cam Ward's probably the most notable.
Well, I think the most notable is Vernon Adams, but Cam Ward certainly recently has been
example.
That guy.
Yeah.
It's been attempted. It is very, very difficult.
It's tough.
And now it's one thing to go FCS to Power Conference. It's probably another, although I really like the Mountain West, but I don't think it's going to be the craziest landing spot given some of the defenses that, Sluka is going to face at UNLV. So hopeful, but also indicative of where a program is that you have to start an FCS quarterback this early on.
What's your read on Wyoming now under Jay Sauvel? New coach.
I think the best that they can hope for, and Wyoming's just always going to be that hard out, and defense has sort of fallen off a cliff, so I think it's going to take some time to rebuild, at least by the context and the bar that Craig Bull had at Wyoming. But I think he's got his work cut out for it, but Laramie's still going to be, in my mind, a huge advantage, and I think the best they can hope for in year one is to be sort of an agent of chaos, and we'll see from there. That's what I have for Wyoming.
They host Boise State, by the way, Thanksgiving weekend in Laramie.
I feel like we mentioned that on the last episode when we were talking about Boise contenders, and that's just the trap. It's icy trap. That's all it is to me.
It is, yeah. So Jay Salvo promoted from within after a few years of being defensive coordinator. A lot's going to depend how much they get out of their quarterback, Evan Svoboda.
Yep.
Monster quarterback, 6'5", like 250. 13 returning starters on the whole for that program. I agree it's a hard out. I don't know how optimistic I should or shouldn't be, though. I struggle with Wyoming this year because I think there's a lot to like, but at the same time, promoted from within, but still a new coach. Things are changing. Very unclear to me.
So, yeah, look at the teams that they start their schedule. They have an ASU team that's still very much in the rebuild, but that's on the road, late August.
Yeah.
Idaho shouldn't be an issue. BYU, I'm going to have to see it to believe it. North Texas isn't going to offer a bunch defensively. Air Force has a ton of new players. We'll get there. San Diego State starting over. San Jose State starting over. Utah State starting all over. New Mexico starting all over.
You're right.
There are a number of games where you're just competence will win. If Savell can sort of build a competent week-to-week team, they'll win a bunch of 21-14s.
No.
And that's pretty good in year one.
You mentioned Air Force, only 6 returning starters.
Yeah. Really fell off a cliff when, Zach Larrier got hurt last year?
Yeah. I remember talking about that on one of our recap episodes that we did deep into the night, Saturday night after the games, and there was a few week stretch there where it was like, what the hell happened to Air Force?
Yeah.
And we knew the injury, but I think we assumed that somebody else could step in and run that, and just was not the case. They were really in a world of hurt after he went down. So this year now, with so many new faces out there, we've come to trust the coaching staff. We've come to trust that program. I think it's relatively stable, but I don't know. Anytime I see 6 returning starters, that kind of creeps me out.
They travel to a new-look Baylor week 3, who they beat in a bowl game. I think the coldest bowl game ever from a couple of years ago.
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
They travel to Laramie. They go way down south to New Mexico. They go across the country to Army, obviously looking for the Commander-in-Chief trophy, and finish the year Nevada, San Diego State. They have Fresno State, but that's at home. Air Force deserves benefit of the doubt. They deserve benefit of the doubt with developing an offense, developing a defense, especially with Troy Calhoun's eye for defensive coordinators and rebuilding defenses. That's been such a strong suit that I still, just on benefit of the doubt, give Air Force at the very least bowl consideration, Commander-in-Chief trophy consideration, and no way in hell, if I'm any of those defenses that has a ways to go, do I want to see the Falcons.
I would agree with that.
So even if it's a down 7-5 type year, they're going to be such a bitch to play against.
Colorado State. Colorado State's the last team on this list before we get into the 5 with new coaches.
The danger?
Or 5 other ones with new coaches, I should say.
Yeah.
But in terms of where they slot here in our danger tiers, Colorado State was sort of middle of the pack. I look at this team, I could see a jump coming in year 3 for Jay Norvell. I like their quarterback. He threw for 3,400 yards last year. Could be one of the best quarterbacks in the conference. I like Jay Norvell. I've always liked Jay Norvell. I think he's a good coach.
Yeah.
That Colorado game last year aside, which I thought was pretty dirty, frankly, on the Colorado State side.
But they, the DB, the corner or whoever who knocked Travis Hunter out, they made up. They went bowling. He sort of explained that it was not intentional. It was just sort of heat of competitive passion. So I'm saying I don't want to label Colorado State as dirty based on that one game.
No, I thought it was a great second act, and a gazillion people watched that video And
Yeah.
I thought it was cool that they did it. I think it was big of
He and Travis Hunter. Yeah.
both of them to do it, actually. And it definitely quelled a lot of the angst around that whole situation. So I'm optimistic generally about Colorado State. And I've always been, because it's an institution that doesn't mind spending on football. They obviously take it very seriously. It's just going to take them a little bit to get back to where I think they want to be. So I could see maybe that jump happening this year. Not such that they're going to win the conference, but definitely more that we're talking about Colorado State in a bit of a different light.
So you say something like, I always have like a soft spot in my heart for Colorado State. In my mind, when I think about Colorado State, I think about a group of grown-ups saying to each other, I guess we should hire Steve Addazio. I guess that's the move. Yes, everybody, we're all in agreement here. Steve Addazio, that's where I like Jay Norvell more than I like Steve Addazio. So yes, I'm hopeful. It's a cool place. It's a relatively new stadium. I hope for a fun offense. They have a ways to go, but it would a decent or pretty good Colorado State, even going back to like the Jim McElwain time, would provide the Mountain West with a level of depth that would make them that much more entertaining. So I'm hopeful, but I still think it's going to take a minute.
We've got 5 teams left here. San Diego State, San Jose State, Utah State, New Mexico, and Nevada. I look at this, I say, well, Nevada's under a big rebuild. First-year head coach
Jeff Choate
coming over. He was a co-DC at Texas for the last 3 years. He's got his work cut out for him.
Yeah, he was a head coach at, I think, Montana State before.
Yes,
he
correct.
took the Texas job. Yeah, so he has head coaching experience.
That's correct. So he's new in the conference. He's got a big rebuild. Bronco Mendenhall, after an extended absence from college football, is back now with New Mexico. I'm not going to say it's a rebuild, but he's got a very young team.
Yep.
Very young team that he's going to have to work with. Utah State's a terrible situation. That's just a bad situation for the players and for the team. Blake Anderson out just a few weeks ago. There's all sorts of strife going on within that athletic department. I can't imagine that's a good situation, even with a lot back this season.
Do you know what their quarterback room looks like? It's Spencer Petras in from Iowa. It's Bryson Barnes in from Utah, relatively local. Jacob Conover, who was at ASU. Like, they have big program guys who were pretty mixed at those big programs. And so, I don't know. Utah State was did they win the conference like 3 years ago, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
So, like, it's a different coach. It's an interim situation. The interim was not on staff before. I'm hopeful for everybody at Utah State that had nothing to do with anything that got Blake Anderson fired, that maybe they can muster like a David Braun situation, thrust into that position late as an outsider and sort of use that to rally everybody. But I don't know the depths to which it was a cultural issue with Blake Anderson. There's a lot has not come out about at the time of our recording about how that ended. But the best of Utah State recently has been interesting.
And then the other 2 schools with new coaches.
Yeah.
San Diego State with Sean Lewis, who leaves Colorado under weird circumstances, sort of was demoted.
I'm assuming he just didn't want Shedeur Sanders throwing for 1,000 yards a game. Yeah. Didn't get along with Deion.
He is taking over at San Diego State. Tough schedule, not a lot of experience, but I think the prospect of a Sean Lewis offense is at least fun. It'll make for good TV. And then to close things out, it's San Jose State. San Jose, like Brent Brennan left to go to Arizona. San Jose State's not going to a bowl game this year. They're not. But I am curious to see what Ken Niumatalolo looks like when he's not running the option, which is sort of the big headline with this. Like, it's going to feel like you and I are living on a different timeline without him running the option.
If I had told you in 2008 that you were effortlessly saying Ken Niumatalolo's last name,
not only that, I can
never
spell
have
it
believed
now.
me.
I could spell it now.
I know.
Too.
You're a hell of a guy, Ty.
Thank you.
You're a hell of a guy. The only thing I'll say is San Diego State, to me, has a world of potential if Sean Lewis is able to sort of galvanize the football behind the scenes, money-wise, a new stadium. I just think there are going to be so many Southern California players and West Coast players. I almost said Pac-12. Womp womp. West Coast players looking for a portal home or whatever. And Fresno State has been a very successful beneficiary of that. Some of the smaller big schools, your Arizona, whoever on the West Coast have benefited. But I don't know. If you can get San Diego State going and you have a fun offense like Sean Lewis definitely has had at previous stops. They bring in it's AJ Duffy from was he from Northern California, who was at Florida State.
Right.
He should be the new starting quarterback. Like, I don't know. I see a lot ahead of San Diego State that's positive, especially zagging after so many years of like the Rocky Long defense. And, the best of the Brady Hoke defenses and stuff. They won in a very specific, not terribly entertaining way. If they can sort of flip that script a little bit, I think there's flash possibility.
Anything else on the Mountain West?
No, it's another one of those conferences, and I mentioned this with Conference USA, where our familiarity with the coaches and personalities and systems outside of whatever Ken Niumatalolo's offense is going to look like this year, I think makes it exceedingly watchable. I also always get excited about talking about altitude, which I still say offers like a wild card element to a lot of these games, I guess from the west portion of the Mountain West. And we're divisionless now, right? Within the Mountain West?
Yep.
I believe.
Yep.
So that changes some calculus. I'm very excited. I think there's a lot of potential for fun here.
We got no food. We got no jobs. Our pets hate their father.
The MAC.
Let's talk the MAC, Dan Rubenstein. The big old MAC.
Let's do it.
Here's what's interesting about the MAC. If I can get sentimental a bit with you.
Okay.
The MAC is a Kirk Ferentz fever dream.
As in like a nightmare-y...
It is a truly terrible offensive conference.
Oh, okay. He dreams of a place where he can be amongst his own, is what you're saying.
Unlike anything I've seen in a long time.
Okay.
Bill Connolly, our friend, ESPN, does great work. He projects that the best offense in the MAC will be Bowling Green, and that Bowling Green will be the 91st best offense in the country.
All right.
10 of the 12 teams in this conference are projected to have an offense graded 110th or worse.
Jesus. Okay.
So that's when I took a step back. And I'm like, there's some beauty in this, isn't there?
Sure.
Because
everybody's playing on the same level, yeah.
I feel like watching the MAC is like the college football equivalent of deleting your social media accounts and just sort of enjoying the world without all that excess noise. Because we're in a world now where everything seems to be clumping more and more together on the college football side of things. The MAC is in its own little bubble. And I feel like there's a lot of charm to that. It's just self-contained. It's beautiful football in its own right. It doesn't always need to be pretty. There's a reason that I didn't include any of these teams in my G5 playoff tier.
Right.
But that's okay, right?
Yeah,
it is what it is, and it's proud of that.
You can have your Tuesdays with Maury. I will do Wednesdays with Connor Bazelak. Great.
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. And more to the point of bucking trends, the MAC is relatively unchanged over the last 25 years.
That's true.
Adding
UMass next year.
UMass next year, but the membership right now is basically the same as it was 25 years ago in 1999. There have been a few minor changes, right? They're also ditching divisions. They're going to a pod system, so 4 pods, 3 teams each. It's not unlike what we've seen elsewhere. They're doing it in part to protect the rivalries and give teams more access to other teams in the conference, what have you. But it's a relatively stable conference. There's only one new coach this year. Pete Lembo takes over for Ball State. But like 11 guys. 11 guys are the same.
He takes over at Buffalo.
Buffalo. Sorry, I said Ball State.
Yeah, you're good. Because Mo Linguist went to Bama late in the
That's
process. Right. Kalen DeBoer hired him. Yeah.
So with all that being said, and we alluded to this a little bit on some of our previous episodes, I think the 2 teams to beat are Miami, Ohio, and Toledo. It feels like Toledo's always in there. Miami, Ohio doesn't always play a beautiful brand of football, but they are more often than not pretty stable.
Yeah.
And at least in that top tier.
Your guy, Chuck Martin. Been there since 1981. Yeah.
Chuck Martin, still there. Yeah. Outside of those 2, though, you've got a meaty middle of Northern Illinois, and Bowling Green and Western Michigan and Ohio that are
I'd say probably Ohio too. Yeah.
that are interesting for a couple reasons. And then you've got a bigger clump of 6 teams in Buffalo, Eastern and Central Michigan, Ball State, Kent State, and Akron that it's just not happening for them. Okay. Let me start with Miami, Ohio.
Okay.
Miami, Ohio is interesting to me for a whole host of reasons. 11-3 last year. They beat Toledo in the conference championship. They lost to App State in the Cure Bowl. Also of note, a matching 11-3 against the point spread. For those of you who care about such things, Miami, Ohio was very good against the point spread last year. They will not win 11 games again this season. I don't think they're strong enough on offense to get back there. They're also guaranteed at least 2 losses on the road this year at Miami and at Cincinnati in the first 3 weeks of the season. I'm not crazy about Cincinnati. Cincinnati's not losing at home to this team. All right. You put that one in the, well, I'm not going to smoke the thing, but you can put that one and take a toe if you want.
Sure.
But all that said, I repeat, the point of the MAC is what happens within the MAC. And to that end, Miami is the clear best returning team this season. They're dangerous because they've got the best quarterback and defense in the conference. It's like the Dan Rubenstein rubric to a T.
Nice.
Brett Gabbert is still there.
Yeah.
And if he stays healthy, he's got a shot at eclipsing 10,000 passing yards, which is cool.
Great.
He's got 4 guys back up front, definitely helpful. It's just a matter of finding playmakers. They lost Rashad Amos. He went to Ole Miss. The running back went to Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Someone really needs to step up and give them some pop on the ground. They're also dangerous because of that defense, which, again, clear class of the conference. It was a top 20 opponent-adjusted defense last year. This year, it'd be around the same. We've got most of the front 7 back. Brian Ugu, their edge rusher, whose name I had to look up how to say it. 8 sacks last year. The secondary is a concern. They'll figure that out. But the reason that you would doubt Miami.
Amos to Colorado, by the way.
Colorado.
Went to Mississippi State and then Colorado. Yeah.
My bad.
Yeah.
The reason they're not dangerous is because of how they play. This is not a team built to blow anyone out ever. Even with a veteran quarterback like Gabbert.
Yeah.
It's just sort of always been that way under Chuck Martin. Been to a bowl game 7 of the last 8 years. He's wildly successful there. It's just never pretty. Like, they're going to lead with defense.
Are you calling him LA Gear Kirk Ferentz? Is that what you're saying right now?
I kind of am, Dan. Yeah.
All right.
Like a lot of rock fights, a lot of games where you don't leave yourself much margin for error. But still, he finds a way to get the job done. He won 11 games last year.
You're leaving out my favorite low-key off-season storyline, and it happens to involve Miami of Ohio. Miami had the Lou Groza award-winning kicker from last season, right? They had the best kicker in the sport. And at some point during the winter portal, I think he got offered, a lot of money, allegedly. I don't know if it was Oregon or Texas, somebody big, somebody that had the money to throw around that needed a kicker. And they're like, this guy's available, this guy's eligibility. Let's throw a bunch of money at like this absolute boot of a kicker. And apparently Miami found money to sort of keep their golden boot guy around. And then the spring portal opened and Alabama was like, yeah, we're taking him. And Alabama got him. So whatever you feel about Miami of Ohio's offense, they are down an absolute howitzer of a leg in Graham Nicholson is what I'm seeing here.
By the way, Rashad Amos did commit to Mississippi State.
Yeah.
And did commit to Colorado, but is now with Ole Miss.
Oh, he is.
He is with Ole Miss.
It's a triple.
The triple play.
I stand corrected. Okay.
Love it. What a time to be alive.
Yeah, on tour.
On tour, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So if it's not Miami, Ohio for you, if you're not a Miami, Ohio Red Hawk,
yeah,
perhaps you're a Toledo Rocket.
Mm-hmm.
Another team that went 11-3 last season. They almost beat Illinois in week 1. They scored 71 points against Texas Southern in week 2. They beat Miami, Ohio in the regular season, lost to them in the conference championship, lost the Arizona Bowl to Wyoming. 16-15, a very ugly game. I remember watching that game and the highlights. Like, terrible watch. Terrible. But, alas.
Yes.
We have an adage on this show from the wise prophet Ashanti. It's about trust, babe.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best I can do for why I think Toledo is dangerous this year. We just trust that Jason Candle and this team will find a way to be one of the best two teams in the conference.
Recruits better than everybody in the conference. Yeah.
As they have been for pretty much the last decade. They just are always there. And it's still kind of operating under the Jason Candle philosophy. It's a defense that leads the way. A defense that has trended better and better over the last few seasons. A well-coached team, especially in a conference like the MAC, goes a long way.
Yes. Agree.
My questions, though, are what they look like otherwise, because they are completely hollowed out in many respects. Like, only Ohio lost more returning production than Toledo this season. DeQuan Finn, the quarterback, he's at Baylor. Just 4 starters back on offense. They're all wideouts. Quinion Mitchell, who we mentioned last episode, he was their leader on defense. He was a first-round pick. Chris McDonald, a standout defensive back. He's in the NFL. Judge Culpepper, great name, 9 sacks last year, also in the NFL. So just 4 guys back on defense as well. Toledo's still one of the best 2 teams. I think the gap has narrowed this season between them and the next best, which probably NIU or Bowling Green. Toledo will be there at the end of the season. They're probably going to play for the conference championship, but how they kind of adjust now to, I think, like just basically nothing back will be very interesting and instructive as for how we should feel about Jason Candle moving forward.
Yeah, I still consider them to be a co-favorite until proven otherwise.
Yeah. I mentioned NIU. I think NIU is the next team up that I am interested in. 7-6 last season. Opened the year by beating Boston College. Remember, that was kind of a story.
Yeah.
Very streaky last season.
No more Rocky Lombardi, though, right?
No more Rocky Lombardi, which isn't
Dunzo.
saying a whole lot.
Finally.
Which isn't saying a whole lot because he wasn't that great. He wasn't that great. So it's either going to be Ethan Hampton or Jalen Macon. Jalen Macon is the guy who I'm interested in because transferred from Arkansas Pine Bluff. He's huge. He's a big, big dude. Either one of those 2 guys is probably good enough in their own right to reproduce what we saw at quarterback last season from Rocky Lombardi. I'm pretty confident that they're the next team up here. They're similar to Bowling Green in that there's a lot back. 5 of their 6 losses last year were by 1 score. That one game was against Nebraska. They're dangerous because they're kind of boring, actually. That's why. They're going to run it with Ontario Brown. They've got Grayson Barnes as a big tight end who had over 18 yards a catch last season. They're dangerous because they took a big jump forward on defense last year and they got a lot back. Probably won't be as good up front, but just solid all around. They're boring. They go for the center of the fairway and it works.
Great.
If not them as the next team up, it's probably Bowling Green. They lost by 1 point last year to Toledo. Beat Georgia Tech in Atlanta. Lost to Minnesota in the Quick Lane Bowl. They're interesting because of their schedule. They play Fordham, they play Texas A&M, they play Penn State in the first 3 weeks of the season.
I like that you included Fordham in that. Shout out, Pally. Continue.
We are who we are here. We have to be true to ourselves, Dan. Come on.
You're a completist.
They project probably as the best offense in the conference. And they got something like 8 starters back. Again, not a conference defined by offense at all. And so it truly is one of those situations where in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king.
Yep.
Bowling Green's got that going on offense. You mentioned Connor Bazelak. He is the quarterback. They've got some interesting pieces from Terrian Stewart, who's got some pop out wide, to Harold Fannin Jr., who's a flex guy who can, play out wide or be a tight end. A lot back on defense. Led the nation in takeaways last season. They were really tough out on third down. So they've got that going for them. The returning production isn't there to make me feel better about them. And I know that that's a stat. Doesn't necessarily guarantee improvement one way or another, but the line was not good last season and needed far too many big plays to hit in order to score. Success rates on offense were low. If they don't get better on the line, I think that's a real point of concern.
Can I ask you a Kent State question, unless you have more to say?
No, go ahead, please.
I don't have Kent State's schedule in front of me, but every year it's like my most beautiful art project looking at their schedule.
It is.
Because
it's the same
they
thing.
schedule. It's the same thing
It's
this
the
year.
same thing.
One year they had like Georgia, Oklahoma, Washington. It's like that's their September.
Yeah.
Is it this year? Is it like LSU, Oregon, and Texas. Who do they have?
They're clearly using this non-conference slate to fund the entire athletic department.
Of course. Who do they have? Who do they do this year?
They're at Pitt, they're at Tennessee, and they're at Penn State.
Beautiful. Work of art. Love it.
Tennessee and Penn State back-to-back weeks, Mike.
Great.
Yeah.
Get that money.
Kent was 1-11 last season under Kenny Burns. He inherited the least experienced team in college football, so it shouldn't be a big surprise. They were bad. They were starting over with a new quarterback anyway. They had 0 returning starters on offense last year. So a bad season was kind of unavoidable. There are 9 starters back on offense this year. There's enough back on defense. Maybe they take a jump forward. That's the best I can do, though. They're still a year or two away from, I think, getting out of the basement or basement adjacent.
Okay.
And, while we're here, we could talk about Akron. They're kind of in the same boat. But they've got Joe Moorhead.
Jomo, yeah.
They've got Joe Moorhead. So you kind of never want to count out Jomo because I think we respect his aptitude as a schemer and as somebody who knows offensive football.
Sure.
And I appreciate the fact that I've read a lot of, hey, we want to focus more on the offensive line this year. It was a huge issue last year. But, the offense is projected as the worst in college football. Jeez. The secondary could be really bad. Ben Finley's playing quarterback, also still in college football.
Great.
Interesting, always interesting. But
came over from what, Cal?
Yeah,
is that where he was?
Cal.
Yeah.
But, it's another situation where there's just there are too many gaps to plug. And I don't really like their chances of doing so. Ball State's kind of teetering on the brink of being pretty low on this tier system as well. The offense could get better. The defense could be way worse, right? It's just will one do enough to kind of mitigate the other?
Right.
Remains to be seen. I look at Eastern and Central Michigan similarly. The stat of the year in the MAC. This is the one I referenced on the last episode. Are you ready for this one? I have never seen a stat this bonkers in my life. Of Eastern Michigan's last 85 games, 65 of them have been one possession contests.
Okay.
Can you imagine what that's like? That is like being a Nebraska fan of 2 years ago, and even last year to some extent, but for the last 8 years. Okay? They exclusively play close games. And I think it's because of their coach. Chris Creighton, is a good coach. He is in year 11. He's got a shot at a 4th straight bowl game, which is pretty incredible. And their defense will be all right. They've got enough on that side of the ball. Their offense is going full control, delete, and just rebooting. They need to hit on a couple transfers in order to make it work. But whenever you're playing that many close games and still going to bowls, I think that speaks to the coaching.
I think you're right. It also means that Chris Creighton has basically built a team good enough to not be blown out, but not good enough to never blow out. Or not good enough to blow out.
But it's Eastern Michigan.
Yeah. Well, I know, a totally dreadful history, and now that they're competing to go to bowl games, it's great.
And Central Michigan's under Jim McElwain now year 6, which is how old are we? Another situation where it's they could get better with better quarterback play. If they put better quarterback play behind an experienced line, that could be a jump forward. The defense has some guys back. They could improve, but improvement here is almost exclusively dependent on the offense. The offense has to get better, and you would expect that Jim McElwain could make them better on offense. But
how familiar would you say are you with the depths of this roster? And I know your answer is probably going to be not very. I just want to know if there's anybody that has a first name similar to Max with 2 X's, like Max Crosby for EMU, or the all-timer Brogan Roback for EMU. Are there any Brogan adjacent first names on this roster?
I have not done that deep a dive. I can't.
Similarly, the single best tweet or whatever, this is related, of the early college football or the preseason is when Roger Sherman takes a deep dive into BYU's roster and counts the total Cadens and Bradens and whatever. That's a beautiful, beautiful annual tradition.
You could set your
That's
watch
all.
by it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a tradition unlike
No
any other.
Brogans, apparently,
Brogans.
this year.
Pete Lembo takes over at Buffalo. I like the hire. It's a rebuilding year. Big time.
Yeah, of course.
At Buffalo, not Ball State, as I said earlier, I apologize. But they have some interesting scenarios this year that I think are worth mentioning. Like, they get Toledo at home in a very obvious letdown spot for Toledo. It's a week after Toledo plays Miami, Ohio. And Buffalo is off a bye the week before, so they'll be ready for that game. The defense last year was stout. There's enough back, I think, to remain decent. Offensively, though, they lost every non-offensive line starter. Now, is that a big deal? Probably not. They were terrible on offense a year ago.
Yeah, no.
So starting anew is not, it's okay. It's not ideal. It's not the kind of thing that's easy to fix, but it's at least a clean slate, let's say.
Okay.
For Pete Lembo, who I do like and I think can help turn that program around. We got 2 teams left then.
I'm listening.
Western Michigan, the Broncos. I mentioned Western a few episodes back as a team that intrigues me in the MAC. And this is a question of how much returning production means to you. What does that mean to you, Dan? In the wake of a rebuilding year, because that's what last year was, I think there's a case to be made that Western could be dangerous with what they have coming back. Bill Connolly has often said for years that we've known him now, sophomores become juniors. When you start young, you these guys grow up within the system. And now they're 12th in the nation returning production. They got 17 starters back, a veteran quarterback, a leading rusher, a leading receiver. They're all back. The line should be good. Also a ton back on defense. So the pieces are there. But the schedule makes your eyebrows go up a little bit. Like, they open the year at Wisconsin and at Ohio State in back-to-back weeks. It starts off hot. The schedule, though, is more a story of who they don't play. They don't play Miami, Ohio. They don't play Toledo. They don't play Ohio.
Great.
So they skirt some of those teams. My issue with Western is that they lost 8 games last year. 7 of them were by at least 13 points. 4 were by at least 24 points. It's not like they were close. If they were closer, I'd feel better about them taking a jump this year. If they were in Eastern Michigan losing a bunch of 1-score games, I feel better.
Right.
That's not Western. It just wasn't Western. So I like the pieces. I like what they have coming back, but I'm a little pessimistic that it's going to happen.
And it's year 2 of a coach, and so
Lance Taylor.
You give a little bit of room for, self-evaluation as both a coach and recruiter and developer, whatever, and the assistants and everything, that you should look more like what you want to look like in year 2. Whether that results in more wins, who knows? But yes, there should be more apparent vision this year.
All right, Dan. Final team here in the MAC's Ohio. Ohio won 10 games last year. Ohio beat Iowa State in week 3. That was the game where Matt Campbell sort of freaked out at someone.
I remember.
Yeah.
And then turned it around. Rocco Becht was totally fine.
Had a good year after that.
The offense took a huge step forward. After that specific moment, I believe the offense was totally respectable. So
it was.
They got that Ohio bump, I guess.
Yeah, the Ohio bump, yeah. Ohio's the cautionary tale, I think, of how the transfer portal can decimate a team's roster.
Yep.
21 guys transferred up to a power conference or left for the NFL. Now, they backfilled it with 17 transfers. All in all, though, they got 6 returning starters, which isn't a lot.
Yeah, it's tough.
Should have a solid defense despite the heavy losses. They lost 9 of their top 12 tacklers. The 4 guys they have back are 3rd or 4th best in the conference at their position, so they're decent, but just a lot of gaps that they got to plug. They got to hit on some of these transfers. The other fun and dangerous thing for Ohio is what we saw in the bowl game with their quarterback Parker Navarro and Ricky Hunt. So Navarro showed some serious dual threat chops, and Hunt scored 5 touchdowns. This is a long way of saying that it hurts to lose somebody like Curtis Rourke, who transferred to Indiana. But they might have some interesting pieces that can kind of step in and take over for that production. It's just like there's so much new here. It's hard to know what to expect. The schedule isn't great. They're at both Miami, Ohio, and Toledo. There's almost no way they're getting back to 9 or 10 wins. I think like 8-4 is probably the absolute ceiling for this team.
There are no more Rourkes to be had
I don't believe so.
after
no.
Nathan and Curtis. There's
I
no
think-
like Zeke waiting in the wings
Not until the Rourke
somewhere
start
in
having
Canada.
kids. Not unless there's a little Rourke running around out there.
All right. Damn. End of an era.
End of an era. Yeah. We'll see what he does at Indiana. I'm excited to see that.
Yeah.
Okay. We got one left. Should we do it?
Let's do it.
One more. It's the Sun Belt.
Patriot.
Welcome to the Danger Zone.
The Sun Belt.
There it is.
Sun Belt, Dan.
Let's talk Fun Belt.
The Sun Belt actually has divisions. It's the only conference that still has divisions. We've got an East. They've got a West. If you are looking strictly based on computer projections, there's a clear top tier that is James Madison, App State, Louisiana, and Troy. And I only agree with half of that.
Okay.
I like App State a lot. If you listen to the last episode, you know that. I like Louisiana a fair amount. I think both of them make
Okay.
a lot of sense. I'll put ULM, Southern Miss, and Georgia State in the basement.
Okay.
But then 7 other teams, basically half the conference. Feels pretty wide open to me. Pretty wide open to me.
I'm ready.
A lot of these teams made bowl games last year.
That's
and there's
true.
a case to be made that the Sun Belt is the best group of 5 conference. From a numbers standpoint, I think the answer is yes.
Sorry.
Thank you.
It's just been too long since I played.
No, that's important. We
Yeah.
need to work that in.
Danger.
But it is very wide open. I think I saw only one of the 14 teams in this conference projects to have a better defense than offense. So we're
Okay.
going to see a lot of points this year. And the other cool thing is that James Madison can actually win the conference this year, as opposed
Sure.
to the last 2 years where they were in this holding pattern because they bumped up from FCS. That's gone now.
Dylan Morris, it's your time. Where did Jordan McLeod go? Texas State?
Jordan McLeod went to Texas State. Can I start
Yeah.
with Texas State?
Please, go for it.
Dude, Texas State. I'm all in on Texas State.
Yeah.
I'm all in. I have them winning the West this year. I have them winning the West. 8-5 last season. It was a revelation in year 1 under GJ Kinney. And he did the thing where he took a bunch of transfers, scored close to 37 points a game. This year, a lot back, the 127th hardest schedule in America, which is
Amazing.
the second
Great.
easiest in the conference behind JMU.
Well done.
I think they're going to be dangerous because they upgraded at quarterback,
You think so?
but by accident.
Okay.
By accident. So what happened was they had TJ Finley, who had a good year last year.
Mm-hmm.
They had TJ Finley. They brought in Jaden DeLaura. There was an uproar on campus because Jaden DeLaura ties to a sexual assault case and a lawsuit
Right.
and all that.
Yeah.
So then he ends up leaving school. They end up picking up Jordan McLeod from James Madison. So you add Jordan McLeod to an offense that pretty much brings everyone else back. And it feels like there's a very real possibility that they're at least as good as they were a year ago, if not better.
4th school for Jordan McLeod? USF to Arizona to JMU, Texas State.
4th
Okay.
school. Correct. So that's favorable. The schedule, which I mentioned, like most of the tough games are at home. They're week 2 at UTSA, which is a really important game, just as like a bellwether, different conference, but as a bellwether to see how they stack up overall in the G5 conversation. Week 6, they're at Louisiana, which could decide the West. But the Troy game's at home. They don't play any of my top 3 teams in the East. I'll also add that they beat Baylor. They beat Baylor last year at Baylor. And Baylor goes on to 3-9. Their numbers against the pass were bad. And, the offense had trouble scoring. This is not a Baylor preview. This is just to say that mark me down for it. We can put it in the volcano. I don't know if I can get the smoke to work this time. Yeah, there it is. Mark me down, throw it in Takatoa for another Texas State win over Baylor.
Oh, Vortex. Why it burns.
Burns.
Put that one in the volcano. Mark that
Yeah.
one down. You're falling behind, dude. You got to come up
I
with-
know I am.
The issue is defense, right? Like, they allowed 33 points a game last year. It's not clear that they're going to be any better. Their offense scores so freaking fast that it puts a lot of strain on the defense. And, I don't know how that's going to shake out. What I would like to do, though, as I'm kind of fanning away this, whatever this substance is that came out of the volcano, I would like to petition you that we reassign the old Belldozer nickname.
Okay, you can go for it.
Texas State has an edge rusher named Ben Bell, who had 10 sacks, 16 tackles for loss last season. He's sort of like the focal point of that defense.
Okay.
I'd like to bring, I thought Belldozer was a great nickname back in the day.
The Bell Raiser. That feels almost more appropriate for a defensive
You want to
player.
go Bell Raiser?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Hellraiser? Yeah.
Ben Bell, the Bell Raiser. I'm all in on Texas State. I love Texas State this year.
Great.
They're kind of like my sleeper team.
What's GJ Kinney's next job going to be?
It's a good
TCU?
question.
Baylor? UTSA?
It could be Baylor if he beats him again. It could be a deal where you beat him, you get the job.
Yeah. All right.
What team interests you? I'm going to try to go through these relatively quickly.
Yeah, let's get through these. Let's get through this Sun Belt. What team interests me in the Sun Belt? App State's the contender to me.
App State, yeah, it might be Sean Clark's best team. This is going to be his fifth year. This might be his best team. Joey Aguiar, their quarterback, was a revelation last season. 3,700 yards, 33 touchdowns. He's the main reason they'll be dangerous. An open question about the line in front of them, but I think they'll be fine. I also think the defense is going to take a step forward, especially against the run. They were very young last season, and I think it showed on multiple occasions. The interesting trend to watch on the App State side, the defense has regressed the last 3 years. So it'll be interesting to see if they can stop that, reverse that trend this season. The front seven should be better, but being better holistically on defense is a more complicated equation. Also, the schedule's tougher for App State. Week 2 at Clemson, that'll be a nice test, but they've got that Liberty game, which is at home, but still a good opponent. They're on the road at Marshall, at Louisiana on back-to-back weeks. They got a home game against JMU late in November. So for my money, still the class of the conference. I think Texas State's better on offense. I think a handful of teams will be better on defense. Nobody's been more consistent over the long haul, though, than App State. They go to a bowl game, they win like every year. So it's hard for me to not put them head and shoulders above the next best.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
It does.
JMU is like the other interesting talking point. Like I said, they can win the conference this year. They also lost their coach. So Kurt Signetti leaves. He goes to Indiana. The new coach is Bob Chesney, who comes from Holy
Bobby
Cross.
C!
Yeah. Bringing that Crusader energy to the Shenandoah Valley, Dan Rubenstein.
You know it.
This is basically a new team from last year.
They lost a ton.
And they still have talent on hand. Bob Chesney's a good coach. They're not going to bottom out. It's not a situation like that, but they're not going to go 11-2 again. This feels to me like the kind of team that goes 9-3, but is worse than their record because the schedule is pretty easy. We have teams like that every year. So if Bob Chesney can come in and pick up where JMU left off last season, they'll probably be able to make a run at this thing. I am curious about that quarterback situation. So, we talked about Jordan McLeod. Now it's Dylan Morris. You remember Dylan Morris at Washington?
His timing was terrible. He coincided with the John Donovan, Jimmy Lake era. Yeah.
He graduated in the same class as Spencer Rattler, Graham Mertz, and Tua Tagovailoa. He's that old.
But Graham Mertz is still in college football.
But still a 4-star.
Yeah.
He was a 4-star. He has not played meaningful snaps in a couple years, since 2021. They went out, they added a bunch of pieces to put around him and plug the gaps. But I don't know. Like it might take longer to get up to speed than we're assuming, just because James Madison's been a pretty good program for a while. Yeah. On defense, again, more transfers. They lost like 8 of their 9 top tacklers. Everyone has to learn something new because they're switching schemes and all that. There's not a dearth of talent. It's just with so much new, it's hard for me to see them getting back to that same level. So I'm a little bit skittish on JMU, even though I like the direction of the program a fair amount.
You're getting that Holy Cross DNA. You'll be all right.
I agree.
No, he's a good coach, I think.
I agree. I just think it might take some time.
Okay.
I do like Marshall a lot.
Oh, man. This is a tough program. They're going to air raid, right, on offense?
Seth Deggy is now a coordinator.
Yeah.
That's how old we are. I like Charles Huff. I do have some scar tissue because of the game a couple of years ago against Notre Dame.
Of course.
Can't lie.
No, Marshall's not good, but they're good enough to beat Notre Dame. Yeah.
Exactly. I think I like this team more than most.
Okay.
They're installing the air raid under Seth Deggy.
Ooh, okay.
They bring in Mitch Griffiths from Wake Forest. Don't know how I feel about him running the air raid. He wasn't exactly the most precise passer in his time at Wake. Also a little bit undersized. Like I don't like that. I like that he's got some experience, but him throwing it 50 times a game. Good wide receiver situation.
Yeah.
And I think they'll by default improve on both sides of the ball. But like they're on the road at Virginia Tech and Ohio State in the first month of the year. They got both App State and JMU on the schedule because they're in the East. I think the schedule doesn't do them any favors. I've got them as the second best team in the East behind App State. I think they're better than JMU.
Okay. I don't feel good about Marshall. They've been pretty low. There's something that strikes me a bit off about being down and then fully reversing course on all offensive philosophy to try and like bail out the ship.
Yeah.
That
I agree.
To just flip the switch and go air raid, like, I don't know, man. Like this it probably if this was going to work, and maybe it will, but to me, it's like, okay, new coach comes in, here's his vision for offense. Air raid had nothing to do with it when he got there. Was it Charles Huff? And then going to this feels a little like, yeah, Clay Helton hired Graham Harrell, and now USC is an air raid team. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Good luck, everybody.
I think I'm with you. Georgia Southern, man, Clay Helton. Speaking of USC, like
fell off a cliff last year. Yeah.
If you are in the Statesboro, Georgia area, it is a great home schedule for you.
Okay.
Like go to it, even if you don't care about Georgia Southern, go to the games. Mm-hmm. They've got Boise, Marshall, James Madison, Troy, and App State all at home. That's a good slate.
Awesome.
Clay Helton's the coach. The offense has gotten a little bit better each year. The defense, not so much. The defense is where they need to improve. On one hand, they were really young. They've got a bunch of guys back this season. On the other, unclear if there's any like obvious fix. They gave up so many big plays last season. It absolutely killed them. How you fix that is beyond me. I don't know if they've done enough to do that, but they're fairly deep. They've got a lot of experience. The home road splits are fun, if only from a spectator standpoint. I think they're going to knock somebody off with that offense. I don't know who. Like they've got App State last week of the season, which is a letdown game. A week after App State hosts James Madison, that could be an interesting candidate with their offense. They're going to pick somebody off. I don't know who. But they've got a lot of questions to answer on the defensive side of the ball for sure.
Yep.
If I can round out the East very quickly.
Go for it.
Coastal Carolina has 66 new players this year.
Oh, my God. Yeah. It's not going to go well.
Including Noah Kim. Remember him who transferred
Michigan
down
State,
to Michigan State. He figures to be the quarterback. Tim Beck brought in a bunch of FCS and D2 guys to try and offer help on defense.
This is the regular Tim Beck, not the other Tim Beck who is now running the Vanderbilt offense.
That's correct. There's not a lot here that really excites me. So I like the possibilities on defense more than on offense, but I don't like the way the schedule sets up. It's just like this is a 6-win team that probably makes a bowl and just keeps plugging along.
Okay.
I think. Georgia State is in a really tough spot because Sean Elliott left right as spring practice was starting. He is now the tight ends coach for South Carolina.
And dude, they're getting what? They're getting Adele, right?
They're getting Adele. They're getting Del McGee, who was a running game coordinator at Georgia, who I like. Also, Jim Chaney's back with Georgia State.
Jim Chaney is back. Yeah, in the state. Had some good memories there in Athens. Yeah.
They went out. They got like 15 quarterbacks in the portal.
Yep.
I think it's Christian Veilleux from Pitt who's going to be the new starter.
Okay.
But there's just, again, it's like a lot new. You got new systems on both sides of the ball.
Like you disassociating Penn State from Christian Veilleux.
I am.
From Pitt. Only Pitt. Yeah.
So it's tough for Del McGee. Familiar with the area, but he just got a late jump on everything.
Yeah.
And ODU was in 11 one-score games last year.
They're quietly, Ricky Ronnie, quietly building something a little bit tricky and fun there.
Literally every game other than Virginia Tech and Liberty was close.
Yeah.
You look at the schedule this year, the non-conference is harder. I don't find a lot on here that I'm confident about. So I think a more experienced offense helps. Not sure about the defense. I'm biased with Ricky Ronnie. I just like the guy. I liked him when he was Penn State's offensive coordinator. I think he's done more with less in his time at ODU, especially getting the team motivated. So the other thing that I'd point out, just as a fun fact, 7-4 is a home dog in his time as in Norfolk.
Norfolk.
I think he'll have plenty of opportunities to improve on that this season. There'll be plenty of home dog opportunities.
For the Monarchs. Yep.
Yeah. I don't have much to say about ULM other than they are definitively bootylicious. You know why I'm saying that, right? General Booty transfers in from Oklahoma. Pretty much clean slate on offense. New coach Brian Vincent. They're dead last in returning production. It's going to be an uphill climb. I don't hate Southern Miss in the West. I think they'll be better. Tate Rodemaker transferred over from Florida State. Another transfer quarterback situation. Frank Gore is gone, but Will Hall built a roster of transfers and underclassmen that I think can make the offense better. Unclear, though, whether the pass defense gets any better, and that was really bad a year ago. Also, the schedule. I mean, at Kentucky, at Jacksonville State, at James Madison, at Texas State, at Troy. If you're thinking, maybe like they'll get back to a bowl game for the first time, no, we're starting that conversation at 5 losses. It's not going to happen.
Here's the thing, and I have no thoughts on Southern Miss. All of those teams, there's kind of like nothing certain. Even Kentucky. Kentucky started last season out terribly. New quarterback situation. Kentucky's way better. But like you mentioned all those teams, you're talking about, you're not high on Jared Parker, are you? And Troy?
I'm saving Jared Parker and Troy for last.
Like, you're probably not crazy high other than the bell raiser on Texas State's defense in this moment.
The bell raiser, yeah.
Like, I don't know. If Southern Miss is pretty good, especially on offense, they can give some teams some trouble.
South Alabama. Another situation where a coach left to be a coordinator or be an assistant. Kane Womack left. He's now the DC at Alabama.
Big major hire, right?
Yeah, Major Applewhite takes over. He had been on the staff for 3 years, so he's familiar. He's got some of his own head coaching experience. What he doesn't have are a lot of players with actual experience, and he didn't really go crazy with transfers. So that either means he likes what he has, or he couldn't get anybody to come there. It's an open question. I don't know. I really like their starting quarterback because I don't feel like we've had enough Geos in college football. The last I can remember is Gio Bernard for North Carolina.
Okay.
Gio Lopez is a redshirt freshman.
Okay.
Who brings some running ability to the quarterback position and could be interesting to watch. But otherwise, Major Applewhite's fine. He's fine as a coach. The schedule's not great. I think it'll be a struggle to get back to a bowl. There's just too much turnover. But again, it's not a situation where they're going to bottom out. It's just, they're starting over in some respects.
Wasn't there? God, who was the 49ers drafted at Giovanni? Did they not?
I think it was Giovanni Bernard.
No. Didn't they draft a Giovanni Carmazzi?
Oh, wow.
Giovanni Carmazzi, Hofstra, baby.
Is that the dude from the Bear?
That is the dude from the Bear.
Okay.
Giovanni Carmazzi, the Hofstra, which no longer exists as a program, mind you.
Correct.
He was drafted in the 3rd round, and it was, I don't know why we're going down this road. I don't know why I'm going down this road, but I'm pretty sure he was the quarterback that was drafted pretty high. Yeah, it was Steve Mariucci.
Wow.
He played, Giovanni Carmazzi played, and Steve Mariucci was like, this guy's going to be, I found a guy, guys. I found
I remember that.
a guy. Okay. And they played a preseason game.
I remember this
against,
story,
it was like the Steelers or the Patriots or something. And Steve Mariucci was watching from the sideline. Like, I don't know if it was like the Hall of Fame game. It was one of nothing preseason game. And they put him in. And Steve Mariucci, in a documentary or something about that time, was like, I've made an enormous mistake. He has no idea what he's doing. That's the Geo I remember. Sorry.
All right, 3 more teams here.
All due respect to Giovanni Carmazzini's family. Yeah.
Gio Lopez, I think will be fun.
There you go.
Louisiana, I like Louisiana. 2 points of note. This is not the Billy Napier of Louisiana. I feel like people are still digesting that fact. Those teams were better. They're better organized. They're just better in general. Like, I think last year, as a second point, was a bit of an aberration, especially on defense. They lost a bunch of guys. 7 of their 9 top tacklers. Guys were in the portal. It wasn't ideal. They went 6-7. I am high on them this year because they have a lot back from an offense that had 400 yards and 32 points a game. I'm optimistic that the defense also improves in a big way. My main point of hesitation, though, is at quarterback. Zion Chris, great name, had a good year last year, transferred to Houston. And so they've got some experience behind him. I think it'll be Chandler Fields at quarterback. If not him, it'll be Ben Woolridge. But in neither case will the new quarterback offer the same dual threat abilities as Zion Chris.
Yeah.
So it's going to look a little bit different. They also hired a guy I think you will love. Their new defensive coordinator is Jim Salgado. He's been an NFL assistant for the last 6 years or so. The quotes from this dude are awesome. Awesome. First off, every other sentence is about how they need to stop the run.
Great.
Every other sentence. Clearly
Love
an
it.
emphasis.
Focus. Vision.
They do need to stop the run, so he's on point there. They got pushed around last season in a big way. He's also not crazy about labeling his scheme. Quote, the scheme? That stuff's overrated, he said. It's about the players.
I agree with that. Yeah.
What do they do well? That's our job as a coach. Put them in the best position so that they can be the best version of themselves.
Tackle somebody as soon as humanly possible.
Is that not refreshing?
I do like that.
Love this guy.
Yeah.
I think this is an 8 or 9 win team.
Okay.
October the 29th, they're on the road at Texas State. Both teams off a bye. Pretty good chance that's the game that determines the West. So I'm interested in that. Arkansas State's Butch Jones.
I think they're going to be good.
Yeah, they were crazy young last year. And they started a freshman quarterback in Jalen Rayner. They beat Louisiana. They pounded Texas State late. So with the youth came some inconsistency. Having pretty much everyone back this year should mean improvements on offense. It's just a question, again, of defense. They've got enough back on defense. They added some transfers to beef up their depth. I think they should be better all around. I think there is big-time sleeper potential with the Red Wolves because of the offense, mainly because of the offense. But I'm with you. I like them a lot.
Look, they beat decent teams. They finished stronger than they started, given who they played and their schedule and how ugly they lost by a bajillion points to either Texas or Oklahoma to start the year. And I don't know, like when you go from clearly terrible to pretty good, even if it takes 3 years, I think that's the right direction. I'm good with Arkansas State. If you're young and becoming pretty good, I think that's a team worth paying attention to.
Let's close things out with Troy, Dan.
Okay.
Troy was 11-3 last year. They won the Sun Belt. Lost to Duke in the bowl game. John Sumrall left, went to Tulane. They hired Jared Parker from Notre Dame, the offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
I am sure Jared Parker's a good dude who works hard and cares about his family.
Scott Loeffler situation. Not a coordinator, is a head coach.
I am sure he's a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
From a numbers standpoint, as you rightfully pointed out on the last episode, he was fine as Notre Dame's offensive coordinator.
Sure.
Where he really fell short, though, was relative to expectations, relative to the talent on hand. In those respects, he was woefully short.
Okay.
My biggest critique, and you know this from talking to me about this all last year, it never felt like the offensive line and the offensive scheme were one cohesive thing. They were sort of operating in their own little universes. And that led to a lot of situations where it felt like they were out of sync. Crunch time, it was a lot of the same stuff that they knew they could do. Right?
Sure.
Most of the time, that was running the ball up the middle with Audric Estime, which for most games was a pretty good strategy. But against the better teams, they could sniff it. They knew it was coming. Also, he just did not get the most out of Sam Hartman. And people have told me I'm crazy for even bringing this up. I'll bring it up again. If you prorate Drew Pine's stats in 2022 and compare them against what Sam Hartman did last year, Sam Hartman was still better, but that gap was not as big as it should have been. It just wasn't. I don't think he maximized that opportunity. So Notre Dame fans were thrilled with this hire by Troy. We wanted to get rid of Jared Parker mid-season. I'd have thrown a few bucks in the hat to pay for the moving. I don't know how they hired him. I have no idea how this happened. I know Jared Parker and John Summerall played together at Kentucky. There's some familiarity there. Maybe that's the connection. I just have a hard time with this because it's not like Troy is starting over. Troy is the defending conference champion. You cannot convince me they couldn't have done better than Jared Parker. I don't get it. I don't get this hire. I think it was terrible. So
we'll see what happens. Okay.
On top of that, Troy's 129th in returning production. It's a completely hollowed out roster. They got 2 starters back. That's it on both sides of the football. So I guess the upside, if you're Jared Parker, is that if it works, you can say, wow, I rebuilt this team in my image. The downside is good program, a lot of success, but a really difficult starting position for a first-time, full-time head coach. He was in interim for a little bit at Purdue. I don't see this working. I'm low on Troy because I'm low on Jared Parker. It's been a successful program for a long time. They've done a good job hiring coaches that have, unfortunately, used the job as a stepping stone to get to bigger and better things. Maybe Jared Parker will be a great head coach who wasn't a good coordinator. It's a possibility. That happens all the time.
Sure.
But until proven otherwise, I'm very, very skeptical that this is going to work for Troy.
Okay. The good news multiple people have won at Troy.
Yeah.
Multiple people have won at Troy.
Different types of coaches who run different schemes. Like it's
totally.
It's been a
both
successful,
Neil Brown and John Summerall most recently have won at Troy.
It's been a successful program for a long time, and there's reasons for that. It's not all on the coach, but there's it's a good landing spot. It's a good place to go and coach.
If the alignment is there with administration and boosters and fan support, all that stuff, a lot of people can win at a successful place. We've seen it all over this landscape. Maybe Troy is that place, and Jared Parker deserves our attention, and we'll see if it works out for him. And hopefully it's not a situation you hear those stories after the fact where the AD was like, he was the only candidate that looked me in the eye and shook my hand. Yeah. And that's why I hired him.
We're gonna get something like that.
You're like, that's why you hired him? That's it?
Post-mortem. Yeah. Again, I don't know him. Like, he could be a good dude, and I hate to do this thing where I'm just like crapping on a guy that I never met, but all I have to go on is what we saw last year at Notre Dame. And it wasn't good. It really wasn't good. After a full offseason of talking this guy up and the system's going to look the same as it was under Tommy Rees.
Was he one of the 7 Penn State wide receiver coaches in 9 years?
Yeah.
He was one of them? Yeah.
He was at Penn State. I forget his exact role, but he was there. He was part of that.
Yeah. Additional notes on Giovanni Carmazzi, Ty.
Please.
Steve Mariucci drafted him because he was both a quarterback and a Rhodes Scholar and a point guard. Okay? Now, you know how NFL scouting goes, where you'll pay attention to the local team, like if you're the LA Rams or whatever, you want to familiar yourself with USC and UCLA players because maybe that'll be an easier transition, right? Now, nobody moving across the country, or maybe somebody from Southern California.
Yeah.
From Northern California, eligible to be drafted in that draft by the 49ers, Tom Brady.
Hometown guy.
From Northern California. And Giovanni Carmazzi in that preseason game played against the Patriots in Tom Brady's first preseason game. Pretty cool. Pretty cool story, everybody. Anyway, who do you have winning the Sun Belt?
I've got App State winning the Sun Belt.
Okay.
I included Louisiana as one of my G5 playoff contenders. I think push comes to shove, I'm still probably higher on Texas State, but I have more questions about their defense.
Okay.
So in a really weird counterintuitive move, I'm going to leave Texas State out of that equation for the G5 playoff spot, and I'll keep Louisiana there, even though I do tend to like Texas State a little bit more.
I have Fresno over Boise in the Mountain West. How about that?
Ooh. Okay.
That's all.
So look, this is a lot of content on all things G5. We covered all 5 of the conferences. We originally thought maybe we would just lump Notre Dame in here. Glad we didn't do that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about Notre Dame at a point later on this season.
Didn't insult Oregon State and Washington State by including them in this as well.
No.
Yeah.
No. We will do maybe a separate independence show.
Yeah.
Thank you one and all for bearing with us here a longer than usual episode as we talk about all these teams. Solidverbal@gmail.com as always is the email address. Email in, let us know what we got right, what we got wrong, what we should do better next time around. Next episode, we're going to start up with the ACC. We'll do it from a bigger picture perspective. What's changing in the conference? What are the storylines? What are our tiers in the ACC? And then the next 2 episodes, as we're doing 3-parters, will be about specific teams within the ACC. So we'll give ourselves plenty of time. Hopefully we're not doing 1.5 hour episodes. We know your time is precious, but thank you as always.
It would have been shorter without the Giovanni Carmazzi detour, but continue.
It was necessary, I think.
I know. I understand.
It was necessary. Hit follow, hit subscribe, tell your friends, rate, review, all that fun stuff. Go to verballers.com if you're interested in supporting what we do. Get the ad-free episodes, bonus content, so on and so forth. My voice is fried, my man.
You're good.
I need to go drink something before this cuts out of me like it did last summer.
All right. Done.
For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrand. Thanks for bearing with us here. G5 in the books. We'll talk to y'all soon. Stay solid.
Peace.